Hi, everybody, and welcome to the B9Captivate product webinar. Today, I've got with me Cody and Megan from our sales team. They're going to be joining in the Q&A later on. My name is Eric Henriksen. I'm an engineer with B9 Creations, and be happy to walk you through our software here. Real quick, before we get started, I want to talk about the difference between the two softwares we have available in our product offerings today. So B9 Create is for the layout and support of prints. It's used to manage printers. It's used to remotely monitor printing. B9Captivate, which is the product we'll be talking about today, is used to develop custom material settings for your B9 Core Series printer. If you have any more questions about B9 Create, please check out our webinar at b9c.com/support. Also, I wanted to let you guys know about our beta test program. If this is something that interests you, please check out b9c.com/beta and sign up to be one of our beta testers. We'd love to hear from you guys on the issues of software, hardware, material, and we'd love to have you start checking out some of these new products we've got in our queue for you. Additionally, I'm going to be launching a few of these polls during the webinar here. The first one should be launching now. Just go ahead and fill those out as I talk, and we'll get those results in. And we appreciate you doing that. All right. So I want to talk to you a little bit about kind of where the industry standard is on the custom materials options. Most 3D printer manufacturers will open up their printer for third-party materials in some way, shape, or form. The industry standard is kind of we'll give you the bare bones minimum that you'll be able to print a successful object with. In many cases, that's enough. You may not need to have ridiculously tight tolerances on the stuff you're doing. You may not have really tight needs in terms of minimum feature size. But what we've done is we've actually commercialized the way that we develop material settings and made it available to the public. So I'm going to talk to you real quick about who normally uses this product. I think it's available for the person that wants to develop their own materials, and within that we have some really cool options for IP protection, so you don't let go of some of your own intellectual property before you want to. If you want to optimize around specific geometries, so you have a part that's, you have a material and the properties work for you today, but you aren't quite able to get what you want out of it. Also, if you want just a broader range of materials, maybe the material that you want to print your part in is available on the open market today. We just don't have the settings for it in our printer. So that's who we're kind of targeting with this product. A couple different use cases you can see up on the screen there. Mr. Tom Burns's quote. He was one of our original beta testers for this product, and he's had some great success. It actually enabled his business to keep growing and enabled him to do what he does best. It's really a solution for all business sizes, large to small. I mentioned before B9, this is the product that we use to develop our own settings. We use it with our strategic partners. We use it with materials companies who are developing their own materials for proprietary purposes. There's really all sorts of reasons that you'd want to get into a product like this. Tom Burns, we already talked about a little bit. He's actually using a B9 resin and refining the way that it prints so that it prints finer features. Printing with third-party resins is another thing. Maybe you need clear resin or something that's just not quite in B9's product offering today. This really enables you to do that. Maybe you want to develop your own custom materials. Like I said, if you're one of those materials companies out there that you do materials well, you can formulate, you just don't have a platform to get that material to the market quite yet, this is the product for you. So we have 3 basic tiers of the Captivate option. The first is actually called Basic, and it's located inside of the B9 Create software. So this is not an additional software you need to download from the website, anything like that. This is the software that we mentioned earlier in the webinar that you use to run your printer. So we have that industry standard option for you where we'll let you print third-party materials. It'll probably turn out, you'll get an object that's the shape that you want, but you may not have all of the fine tuning to be able to really dial in for what you're looking to do. Maybe you have the specific geometries, maybe you're looking for those fine features, what have you. The second option there, the professional column, that's actually our first paid offer. So what we do there is that is the complete separate B9Captivate software. We have all of the features from Basic plus a few more in order to give you real fine control over some of those things that I've mentioned earlier. At the enterprise level, you're including everything from professional, plus you're adding in ability to distribute to third parties. You have a little bit of materials development support from B9 Creations itself. And the enterprise tier is really a customizable solution. So if you think that you're in that tier, please call us for a quote. We'd be happy to work with you on that one. All right, with that, I'm going to go into a quick product demo for you guys and show you how the software actually works. All right, the first thing you're going to see when you launch the software is the Getting Started page. This is just a quick run through of what you need to do in order to get started on your materials developing. You'll see a few definitions for icons, and then at the end it'll basically tell you you need to go to the settings page and start setting up everything. So that's where I'm actually going to go next, is settings. You'll see up here an overview of your license key, which is required, by the way, to run the software. You'll see a rundown of your service level, which is what tier of the product you're in. We're going to be talking specifically about the professional level in this webinar today. Down at the bottom, this is where you'll connect your printer that you plan to do your development work on. So this is type in an IP address. The IP address is located on the home screen of your printer, and just hit connect. All right. Now you'll see a list of materials that are available on that printer right now. Also, just as a real quick thing, I wanted to mention, we do have a feedback section for you here for anybody that's listening in today that currently runs this product. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'd like to get your thoughts on feature improvements, stuff you'd like to see. We'd love to hear from you. Getting into the actual materials development part, click on the materials tab here on the left. If you've already been developing some materials, you'll see a list of materials on this screen. You also have on the top right here a drop-down menu to select the type of printer you wish to develop for, and then the tab for starting a new material. You can see up at the top here, I can actually tab through multiple new materials. So I can reference a few, if you want to copy some settings from one to another, that's pretty easy to do within the software. The home button here takes you back to the previous screen you had already seen. We have three main sections within the software. There's the material, quality, and cycle sections. Material section has mostly to do with how the printer treats your material settings. So this is the name that is displayed on the printer. So if I type in test is what that material is going to be known as inside of the printer. The color over here is the color that is displayed on the printer when you go to select your material in the printing process. Description and version are actually only for your own internal use. This is our way of kind of forcing you into material development best practices. So those will not be seen on the printer, but they'll be seen by you every time you open one of these files to edit. Description is just what you think it is. Add some quick descriptive words about what this material does and what it's intended for. Version is just a real quick whack at version control. We still recommend that you use some sort of version control software external to B9Captivate. Whatever your corporation uses as the standard there would be a good idea. You can treat these files just like a Word document file. So feel free to implement your own solution there. But this is a good place to keep track of where you're at in the development process. So the quality section here, this has to do with properties that are intrinsic to the material you're developing for. So we do have a thickness selection here. We'll develop settings for one thickness setting at a time. The amount of exposure it takes to cure that thickness, that is a specific property to your material that you are going to have to iteratively find out. There's various other features around here, like the amount of bleed that your material has. So various levels of pigment will either allow light to penetrate or not penetrate to a certain depth inside of a material. Your foundation exposure is how hard do I need to hit that material with light to get it to stick to the build table. Same here with X and Y bleed as the Z bleed. The material, the suspensions in the material will sometimes have different capabilities for blocking light from scattering to the side. So these are all properties that are specific to the material you're working on. By the way, on the material development process, there's only, I think it's 4 fields that you actually need to have filled out here in order to start printing. And those are the 4 fields that were included in the basics section that we mentioned earlier. So you have to have a name, you have to have a color, you have to have a thickness, and you have to have an exposure. After that, you're ready to start. You'll notice that these fields have value ranges grayed out within. That's the allowable range of value that you can type into those fields. We have limited that so that it's not going to be possible for you to harm the printer by entering a value that's ridiculously out of the feasible range. We do also give you a default value if you hover over that field for that specific attribute. So those default values are based off of kind of a generic modeling resin. So they're a good place to start, but you're going to have to optimize from there. Additionally, if you wanted to say, right now I've got my 4 requireds filled out. If I want to just use the default values for everything else, just so I can get my exposure figured out, all you have to do is save this material right now, and the printer will actually fill in the default values for everything you've left blank. So just a good thing to note as you're going through your development process. Your cycle section here is how the material, how the printer moves when it's dealing with your material. So you're working with things in here like how far does the lift arm raise in terms of millimeters between layers? How long does it stay at the upper level before lowering back down in terms of microseconds? So this is where you're able to really fine tune for speed in this section. You'll also be able to work through a few technical issues you might run into. Say you've got bubbles that are collecting in your layers or something like that. That's not really a property of your material, although it is related to viscosity. You're going to be able to compensate for that using these cycle settings down here. After filling out the fields to the level that you're comfortable that you want to start printing, the install button up here is going to distribute that material to the IP address of the printer that we typed in earlier in the settings section. The distribute button up here is an enterprise level only button. Actually, if I click on that, it's just going to tell me, hey, you need to upgrade to enterprise to use this. What that will actually do for you is that'll create an encrypted file that you can then email out to, say, a customer in a different state, in a different country. It doesn't matter. And using your license key and a unique password that you generated yourself, they'll be able to unlock that material on their printer and run some prints with your material and your settings. Another thing I wanted to talk about here real quick, there's a help menu on the right here. If you ever get stuck in your development process, this is the first place you should go. We've put a fair amount of work here into running down a description for each of the fields that are represented here on the left. We have the value range. We have some default values in here. We do our best in the text to describe any interdependencies between some of the related fields. So this is going to be your first place to reference if you have a question on what is foundation exposure. I can scroll down here and find there's foundation exposure. One last thing I wanted to mention, as you work through this process, which you're going to do in whatever order is important to you, right? If the Z-bleed properties are what you're after, you're probably going to want to chase that one down first and leave the rest at a default. No matter what order you go through this stuff, the time multiplier is always going to be your last field. All this is it's helping the printer better estimate how long your print times are going to take. So we actually give an estimate on the printer when you go to print before you start printing of how long this is going to take to complete. This is just a factor to kind of better estimate that. So I had kind of mentioned at least one thing here that is enterprise level only. I just wanted to touch real quick on a few other things that enterprise level gets you. Enterprise will actually get you a few more fields here, so you'll have a lot finer control over what you're trying to do. I'd already mentioned that there's that distribute button. That's for if you want some beta testers to test out what you're doing. I also mentioned before there's a little bit of factory support that goes along with the pro level, and that is that customizable option for you guys. So if you have any questions about that, please call us at the phone number that I'll show you later, or drop us an email at info@b9c.com. With that, I'm actually going to launch a second poll here, and I'm going to have you guys shoot me some questions, and I'll do my best to answer those for you here. We've got a few questions prepared for you already. Cody, did you want to start off with that?
All right, so the first question we have for the general audience here is, do you have to use this with a B9 Core Series printer?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes is the short answer. Every field that we make available to you in this software is specific to how a B9 Core Series printer treats your material. So yes, this is either for a B9 Core 550 or a B9 Core 530.
Now, if I have another printer of some sort, can I use the settings from this printer as a starting point for other printers?
A few of the values may actually be transferable into other printers' softwares. For example, an exposure may be a good starting point for you in another printer, or maybe even in one of B9's older printers, like a Creator.
Okay. The next question I got is, where do I start with this whole process?
Sure. So we had mentioned that the best place to start is with your 4 required fields. After that, you're going to want to go to whichever is most important to you. So like I mentioned before, if you want something with really good dimensional accuracy, you're probably going to want to start off with a Z bleed and an XY bleed. We don't really have any specific recommendations on where to start because it's really specific on what you're trying to do with this material. Are you trying to hone in a material that already exists but won't quite print the way you want it to? Then you're going to attack it a slightly different way than if you've got a third-party material that you're just trying to get to print at all. So that's really where you start is completely up to you, and you're the professional on your specific application.
Yeah, that's good to know. Next, is there any baseline for the values that are available to alter there?
Yeah, so I had kind of mentioned in passing before, if you hover over each of those fields, it'll give you a default value. That default value is from a generic modeling resin. It's a great place to start, but you're probably going to want to optimize from there based on your specific application. And once again, I would just recommend whatever you're going to be printing, print with that to develop your settings.
Okay, and then speaking about prints, do you offer any prints available for testing as a default?
Yeah, that's a good question and completely fair. We do not, because of the reasons I just mentioned earlier. Actually, there's no defined way to go about really honing in that material for your application if we don't know what your application is. So it's going to be super application specific, and once again, you are you're the professional in your area of expertise.
All right, perfect. Well, if you have any more questions, so this is to the customers here, please ask them on the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And speaking on that, we have one customer question here for you, Eric. Do you have to be on the same network to upload custom materials to the printer, or can you use a USB or a dongle?
You do have to be on the same network. There's a couple different ways you can accomplish that. So the printer has built-in Wi-Fi, so Wi-Fi is an option here. Obviously, you can do a LAN network or a local area network and run the whole thing through Ethernet cables. You do also have the option, if you're working in remote areas, so your computer is in one facility, your printer is in another facility, you can set up a virtual private network, but that's something that you're going to have to discuss with your IT guy in your company.
Okay, perfect. Next question or customer question here is, what would be the highest viscosity you think would be suitable with your printer or the Core Series?
Yeah, that's a good question. We've tested a pretty broad range of viscosities before, actually, and I'd say you're you're able to compensate for just about anything with the fields that we have available here in the software, anything that we've seen anyways. I mean, we've tested materials in the neighborhood of 1,800 or 2,000 centipoise. So we can really stretch those capabilities out. Now, what you're going to see is that you'll sacrifice something for each of those, for each incremental step up in viscosity. Usually it's speed.
Okay, good to know. So the next question we have is, when using B9Captivate, are you voiding your Duravat warranty when using these third-party resins?
So we do actually offer discount on developer vats during your license period. I mentioned earlier that we've restricted those fields to allow to make sure that you don't damage the printer, but there is the slight possibility that you're going to damage a Duravat. It is a really it is a really great way of producing 3D prints, but it is not impervious. So you should be okay with most DLP and photopolymer resins out there on the market today. So unless you're developing your own material that's got some really crazy properties, it shouldn't be honestly something you have to worry about too much.
All right, perfect. Well, at this time, I'm going to ask if there are any other questions from the customers. Please feel free to enter them in. Well, if not, we're going to go to a last question here, which is the payment options. So what kind of options do we have for paying for B9Captivate here?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, like I said, there's three pricing tiers. There's the free, the pro, free, which is basic, excuse me, pro, and then enterprise levels. At each of those two paid tiers, you have some options for annual payments, quarterly payments, monthly payments. If you want to know more about what that looks like, please just give us a phone call at 1-605-787-0652 or shoot us an email at info@b9c.com. And real quick, I just wanted to give you one more shot at any questions before we close out the webinar today.
All right, we do have one more. The question is, do you have any systematic ways or suggestions for determining base exposure?
Sure. I'll tell you what we normally do. Most of these prints that we do is they're very short, right? So they go fast and you're able to iterate quickly. All we do for that, it looks very similar to like the foundation that you can put on our prints. So it's just a big flat layer. And all you're trying to do with your base exposure, and I'm assuming this is normal exposure, not foundation exposure. All you're really trying to do there is make sure previous layers stick together. So a thin layer of a flat object will really get you a long ways there. I would do a little sheet that's maybe 2 millimeters tall, something like that.
Okay, that's good to know. With that, any last minute questions?
Okay, guys. Thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. One more quick reminder, don't forget to sign up to be a beta tester at b9c.com/beta. And we will see you next time. Thanks.